Greetings, everyone. My name is William Porter. Welcome to this edition of Storytelling Time. The podcast today is another interview session, and I'm very happy to have with us Ms. Becky Jacobs, a local entrepreneur here in the Raleigh, North Carolina area. And Becky, it's so nice having you today.
Thank you so much for inviting me.
Great. I'd like to say to everyone that Becky was with us, I guess, about maybe 6 or 7 weeks ago, near the beginning of January, when you came to the Every Dot Black Mastermind meeting and gave a wonderful presentation. It was very well received. And much of the interview today, as well as next week, because you will be back with us next week, pertains to that particular presentation that you gave. But first of all, I'd like to ask you, and could you please give our audience something that they can hold on to as far as what you're about yourself as well as your business?
Well, that's a great question. You know, I think when people ask the who are you, kind of what do you do, what are you passionate about, I always start with I'm a mom. I think that's a mom. I am a wife. I'm close to my family, and for me, the foundation of family and faith and fitness, paying attention to my own well-being and making sure that I am healthy, fit, and strong, so that I can be my best possible self in all aspects of my life. That's really important to me. So, from a business perspective, I started a business called Simple Change about 7 years ago, and we help create healthy organizational cultures. We deal with things like stress and burnout, deal with high turnover, and really help leaders understand how to create those environments where their teams can thrive and perform well. So that's really the background in what I'm passionate about. And one of the things that I shared with the Every Dot Black group was really understanding how faith provides such a strong foundation, especially as we battle fear and anxiety and the stress that everyone is coping with right now, especially in times of COVID, and really leveraging that to help you listen to your calling, listen to that guidance, and truly know where you're headed.
Well, that was certainly one thing that stood out in my mind back when you gave that presentation in early January, and that is, how do we all deal with fear, especially if you're a business person? But something else that stood out in my mind that you mentioned, and it was kind of it was something that prevailed throughout your presentation, I believe, and that is when you basically made the distinction between personal life and professional growth. Mm-hmm. Now, are these truly separate entities, or are they connected together? One can't do without the other. What do you think about that?
That's a good question. I feel like we come into this world as a whole person, and our career, our profession, the way that we earn a living is just one facet of that. I remember I've always been, for most of my career, focused on the what I call the purple unicorn of work-life balance. The thing that everyone says is just elusive and doesn't exist. But at the end of the day, I work hard because I love what I do and the business that I've built and the clients that I get to support. But that's just one part of my life. And I made some decisions early on about the path that my career was taking, the opportunities that were in front of me. And I had to really stop and say, is this what I want right now in my life? When my children were young, I had the kids are 2 years apart. And when I had my second child, I said, when I come back from my maternity leave, I need to be in a role where I can be an individual contributor, because I'm not willing to miss all of that time with my kids. And I realized that the job that I'm in doesn't allow for that. That's just the makeup of the job as it is right now. I was, under 30 at the time, so I was pretty young in my career. What I realize now, though, is that as a leader, I can start to influence those cultures and create opportunities for men and women alike to be able to have both, to have that fulfilling personal life and have a career that you're proud of and that's fulfilling, in many other ways. So I feel like you are one person, it's one life. Those two things are extremely connected. But if you aren't mindful of taking care of yourself, I like to say you can't pour from an empty cup. If you aren't taking care of your health, if you aren't, paying attention to those relationships that matter, then you can't really have that fulfilling career life because you are one person and it all plays a factor.
Well, one thing I'd like for us to focus on this week, and that is professional growth, and we'll get into personal life a little further next week when you return. But as far as any business person is concerned, and you mentioned this, and kind of it was a focus in your presentation, and that is fear. Fear is something that keeps a lot of us from moving forward if we're not careful. Mm-hmm. Let me read this quote from a prominent motivational speaker. I'm sure you're aware of this person, Les Brown. And he says, and I quote, "Most don't pursue their passion because their fear of failure outweighs their desire to succeed." So my question to you is, how does someone deal with fear if they really want to get into the entrepreneurial world? They want to be a business person.
Mm-hmm. That's a great question. So, I remember when it was time when I started thinking about what next. I'd spent all of my career up until that point in corporate America, right? So a very specific type of framework and business structure. And you have the dependable paycheck, you have the benefits, you have some sense of predictability. And as I tried to figure out what might be that next path for me, I will say that being an entrepreneur was dead last on the list. That was not something that I had planned for. That wasn't something that I ever expected to do. And I knew the challenges that came with it. I'd always seen entrepreneurs as individuals who didn't mind risk and were willing to jump into the unknown with both feet, and just didn't see myself as that personality type, right? I'm fairly I like to say I'm a little bit OCD. I like to plan. I like some element of prediction, but I also like the excitement of problem solving and trying to tackle one thing after the other. And the idea that every day is not the same, and having some autonomy to decide for myself what I'm going to tackle. As I talked with friends and those who knew me well, I kept asking, what types of roles do you see me in, and where do you think I have strengths, and what might be some opportunities that I'm not paying attention to. And ironically, person after person would say, "Why don't you start a business?" And I would laugh and I would tell them that they were, "Thank you. That's very thoughtful. Now I need an actual suggestion that will lead to me not starving." And after more and more people said that, I finally had a friend that looked at me and said, "What are you so afraid of?" And that was that moment of both, I hate you for asking me that question and knowing me well enough to understand my trigger, but also of the self-reflection to say, well, wait a minute, what am I afraid of? So I had to really take some time and think about, what is it that's getting in my way? Am I afraid that I can't learn new skills? Well, no, right? I hear all the examples in my life where I figure that out. Am I afraid that I don't have a strong enough network? No, I have a wonderful network, and I'm so thankful for the many, many people whose shoulders I stand on that are willing to help me. For me, it was the financial uncertainty. I said, okay, so let's unpack that, right? I'm a planner. What do I need? How much do I need? What would the numbers have to look like? And how much time and space can I give myself to figure this out? Because at the end of the day, I think we often forget that one decision is often not the end, right? It's just one more step in the journey. So you may step into entrepreneurship and find that, I don't like this. I don't enjoy this. This isn't for me. And I've had many people that have told me, I tried it and I don't like it. But frankly, you may also step into it and discover, I am now unemployable because I like this so much that I can't imagine going back to, a corporate setting. So for me, overcoming the fear was very much about getting it out of this vague concept, right? Fear is this overwhelming thing, but what exactly are you afraid of? And what's the worst that can happen? What plans could you put in place for contingencies? Are you willing to live with the worst case scenario? And how do you plan around it? And that doesn't mean that everyone should be an entrepreneur, but it does mean that we need to be honest with ourselves about what we're letting stop us from deciding if, do you have enough confidence in yourself to even try? What's holding you back?
It's kind of interesting because I used the same strategy. I remember way back when I first went to graduate school, I was working, I had a full-time job, and it was a good job. Teaching, my first teaching position, as a matter of fact, but I knew it wasn't lasting because I was basically in the place of someone else who was going to return the following year. And so I had an opportunity to go to graduate school, and I didn't know exactly what was going to happen. But as you indicated, I said to myself, well, the worst case scenario, I will turn to this other option over here. That option happened to have been a short order cook. I really love to cook in restaurants. I said, if I don't make it in graduate school, I can at least go back to being a cook, maybe at some point being a chef even. So anyway, it resonates with what you said. But anyway, going back to fear, and I'm sure you are aware of this, you mentioned 3 ways in which you dealt with fear, and some continue to deal with fear. And those are keeping a journal, living with intention, and having healthy outlets. So what I want to do is start, first of all, with keeping a journal. And you indicated that this involves listening to this inner voice, this voice in your mind. And you mentioned this toward the end of your presentation, and I don't know if you're aware of it, probably are aware of it. You gave made a distinction between listening to God's word and listening for God's word, or those positive voices in your mind. You remember that?
I do.
Yeah. So tell us about that. What is the difference between listening to and listening for God's words, or these positive voices that are in your mind?
Yeah. So I'll start with listening for. I find that many of us are so distracted by the busyness of the day-to-day, the constant churn, the constant noise, if you will, that we're exposed to, that we're not paying attention to the voices. We're not paying attention to the dialogue in our head. And I feel that we often rush to fill our days and our minds with information and input, and, whether it's social media or news or reading or email after email after email, it's that sense of busyness, which is often mistaken for progress or real accomplishment. But I find that when many people struggle, as opposed to finding that time to be still and quiet and listen, we tend to fill the void as quick as we can. And I think in some cases, we're almost afraid of what we might hear or, reflect on when we're starting to listen and pay attention. So I think for me, listening for God's voice is recognizing that you have to give yourself that time to be quiet, that time to reflect, that time to, frankly, not be afraid of the dialogue in your head and embrace that. But if we rush to fill every minute of every day with noise, with activity, with, some sense of being productive, then we lose those opportunities. It's almost like we're covering over that voice with everything else around us. So I think listening for God's voice is being intentional about creating that space to pay attention, because it's there. But if you're not hearing it, it may be that you're not giving yourself that space to listen for it.
Even anticipating what God might be telling you about a certain situation.
Absolutely.
Is that correct?
Well, it leads us to listening to. When you've created that space and that intention so that you're hearing, right? You're listening, you're being mindful of what's happening. I feel like we also need to be honest with ourselves. And I share this example with the Every Black presentation. I was in my head, I had a plan, right? I'm a planner. In my head, I had a plan of, when I turn 40, I'm going to exit corporate America or exit what I'm doing and do something else. And I was very confident in my plan. And then I heard that call of now, not when you're 40, not when your plans all come together, now. And of course I tried to negotiate because, I had a plan. So I tried to negotiate my way out of that one. And then just realized, okay, there's gotta be a reason. And I'm going to have faith in this. And I'm going to trust that calling. And I have no idea where I'm headed. I have no idea how I'm going to get there, but I'm going to take one step after another in faith, trusting that, God is leading me down this path for a reason. And I've done that, multiple times in life where, all right, I feel like I'm being called in this direction, and I'm listening and I'm afraid, and that's okay. But I'm going to go down this path in full faith that I'm being led where he needs me to be.
Well, that's good. And let me ask you a second question relating to journals, and that is, why is it important to write things down? In other words, these positive messages that you get in your mind, to actually write them down and how, as you put it, capture these positive ideas. Why is it important?
Yeah, I would say it's capturing the positive and frankly the negative. It's interesting to me, and I've used journaling, and I'll clarify. So I'm not, for me, journaling is not physically writing, because my handwriting is sloppy and frankly, it slows me down. I like, from an efficiency perspective, my background is in ops. I like the ability to search and sort and categorize. So I write digitally. I do it on documents. But that means that I can, first of all, get what's in my head out. Because when it's bouncing around without any framework, without any boundaries, without any so what, it just eats me up, right? It's that churn. It doesn't take me anywhere. So it's getting it out of my head so that it's not ruminating. And I can physically look at it and say, wait, is that really what I'm feeling? Seriously? You're afraid of making a sales call? You're afraid of learning something? Seriously? So it's almost like when you get it out of your head, it's almost as though you're talking to someone else, right? What advice would you give someone else who would say to you this thing? I would say that's ridiculous, right? Pick up the phone, make a phone, come on. So for me, it's getting it out of my head so it's not eating me up. It's having a chance to look at it objectively and say, is that realistic? Does that make sense? What can I do about it? What's my plan? What's the now what? Or even what's the word I'm trying to use to describe this? Am I stressed? Am I frustrated? Am I disappointed? Am I tired? Right? I didn't sleep well last night. Am I tired? Am I just having a distracted moment? And hello, you're human. It's okay too. But it gets it out of my head and gives me a chance to actually deal with it, or just be able to say, yeah, a little distracted today. All right. So move on, right? The other thing it allows me to do, though, is because I do it electronically, I'm able to reflect back. And at the end of each week, I capture the highlights, both my successes and my lessons. What did I learn about myself? What did I learn about my business? What were some of those aha moments? And every week I have that same moment of, dang, I got a lot done this week. Because in the moment, in the 2:00 on a Friday where you're just completely brain dead, right? It's so easy to feel like a failure. Why can't I make myself write this proposal? But when you pull back and zoom out, you realize, look at all the things I got done this week. Look at all of the learnings and the growth. I'm going to celebrate that, as opposed to beating myself up about the last hour where I can't seem to get this email done. So it gives me perspective. It gives me an opportunity to see my own growth. And frankly, to see where, I said the last 3 weeks that I need to improve on this. Come on now, time to hold myself accountable. So there's really, for me, it's that moment of reflection and almost a form of self-coaching. But I can find my hero stories. And I describe hero stories as those moments where you accomplish something that felt impossible at the time. Those are the reminders when you look back, when in those moments of insecurity, or I don't think I can do this, or I'm afraid. Those hero stories, those examples from my past remind me that, yes, you can. You've done it before, even when you were afraid, and it worked out great. That's my encouragement. So it's almost a form of self-coaching to push me through the difficult times and to hold myself accountable when I said the same thing week after week. Why aren't you doing it?
Becky, I do the same thing, not electronically, but I have a little notepad here.
There you go.
I kind of jot things down by writing them down not every night necessarily, but certainly maybe 2 or 3 times a week, and at the beginning of the week especially. I can go back and review what I've done and review my successes, as well as failures, unfortunately.
Lessons.
Others. But anyway, as we continue, because time is really fleeting, you mentioned the second one that you mentioned that you used to deal with fear was intention. It is intention. Could you explain that? How can living intentionally be effective in dealing with fear?
So often there's something we're avoiding doing, right? Whether it's making a phone call or writing a presentation or outlining an idea, there's something that's getting in our way. And for me, by creating an intention, one personal, one professional, what's one thing I'm going to do today to get me one step closer? And that may be making a phone call. That may be creating a draft. That may be, sending an email to someone. But it's what's that one thing, my one intention today, if nothing else gets done, that one thing that will move me one step closer. And I'll often target not the easy thing, right? Don't list the thing you were going to do anyway. That's easy and fun. But what's the one thing that I would tend to avoid or procrastinate on, or, just feel like I can't quite get there? And I try to make it as small as possible. I like using the word draft, right? I'm not creating a proposal, I'm writing the draft. And it doesn't have to be great because it's just a starting point. Or I'm going to list 3 ideas with, potential, marketing ideas. But it's breaking it down into something that's very simple, right? On the face, that I can do to move me past where I'm stuck. I also do one intention for personal. What am I going to do today to take care of myself? That answer, by the way, may be absolutely nothing. I'm going to enjoy a day with no agenda and no obligations, and I could just do whatever I want, and that is bliss. Or it may be my workout, or, it's time for a salad. whatever that thing is. But I find that just picking one personal and one professional intention allows me to focus. And although it seems small, it's really the day after day habits that create our success in life.
But you mentioned those blissful moments that you need. It leads me into the third thing that you indicated that helps you deal with fear, and that is having healthy outlets. So explain to us what that's all about.
Most people underestimate the value of movement and exercise. They underestimate how much pushing that stress out of your body helps you deal with fear, helps you generate energy. I'd like to say that it's important to exercise for sanity, not just vanity. And often we'll skip workouts because I'll do it tomorrow, right? It's the later, it's the long term, it's the scale that I'm thinking about. For me, that healthy outlet, that physical exercise, I walk every day, usually about 2 miles with the dog. Even when it's raining, even when it's cold, I have to get out and move. And I find that that's one of my kind of superpowers is I reset my brain. I reset my creativity. I reset my energy. I'm outside, I'm breathing. It's that pause in the middle of the day. When I come back, especially if I've been stuck on something, I'm not sure how to, what's the best way to approach this or, analyze the data or whatever it is I'm doing. It's that walk that brings all of those insights. And that's it's also an outlet for my fear to kind of walk as you're thinking through it, right? It's almost a way of pushing it out of your head. For me, that physical activity is a huge outlet. I'll also work out. I don't even count the walk as a workout. It's just an outlet. And then I'll work out as a way to just generate that energy I need to push myself forward. But I think for so many people, it's the thing on the bottom of the should list that they just don't get to. I think reframing it as an outlet for stress, an outlet for fear, a source of energy and inspiration and creativity, doing something that's actually enjoyable, but getting your blood pumping, that's what helps push me through.
It's kind of interesting you mentioned that because especially during this time of a pandemic, it's where people are isolated. It might not be that easy for people to get out and go to the park, and especially during the winter time when it's cold. And of course, we know about all the challenges that people have as far as the weather. And I'd like to mention before we go any further, our prayers are with the people in Texas, by the way.
Oh, gosh.
I understand that the weather has improved, at least the temperatures at this taping has gone up from what it was 3 or 4 days ago. But anyway, we're going to go ahead and take a break, and we're going to return and hopefully finish things up. And so stay with us. We'll be right back. Welcome back. We're here with Becky Jacobs, a local entrepreneur here in the Raleigh, North Carolina area. And Becky, something else that you mentioned that's so important in success in business, and that is purpose and or having goals to strive for. That's another way of looking at it. So why is having a goal so important in success in the business, in your estimation?
Yeah, I remember a saying, if you don't know where you're headed, then any road will get you there. I think often entrepreneurs especially think of goals in terms of, it's got to be this structured, specific, well thought out plan. And sometimes it's just about deciding maybe for the week or for the month, what's most important, what's going to drive my business forward. what will distinguish this month from the one before it and help me get one step closer. So, for me, that purpose, why am I doing what I'm doing? Why am I reaching out to clients? What value can I provide? How can I help? Makes a big difference just in frankly, my confidence to go out and sell what I do. But having that direction, even if it's a more short-term, 1 week goal at a time, it helps drive us past procrastination. It drives us past fear. It drives us past excuses just by taking a few minutes to get clear on what is it you want to accomplish, what's realistic, and how does it align with what you're trying to, the value you're trying to deliver in your business.
Well, that's good. And actually, there are a couple of questions I was going to ask you that that you've already touched on. Physical activity and how important that is. Not only physical activity, by the way, but nutrition. I think that's extremely important as well. And also writing things down. And I think you touched on that. But give us, let's say someone wants to. Is thinking about getting into a business of some sort or becoming an entrepreneur, what advice would you give a person who would like to become a business person, an entrepreneur? What would you tell them? And I'll assume that you would give them some of the things that you've already mentioned.
Yeah, honestly, the first thing I always start with is you can't pour from an empty cup. Being an entrepreneur is exhausting at times. It can be very lonely and isolating. It can be terrifying. You're no longer part of an ecosystem of lots of people within a corporation, for example. Your success and failure is kind of dependent on you. So recognizing that this is a marathon, not a sprint, and working, 20-hour days, fueling on caffeine and energy drinks and, crap junk food, it may get you a short-term boost, at least you think it does. It's not going to get you the long-term. And frankly, being an entrepreneur is about the long-term gain, because most of what we're doing now, my business model has changed and evolved multiple times over the last 7 years. The more I learn about what value I can provide, the more I develop my skills, as a leader, the more that I pay attention to the market and how the market has shifted, it changes my business. But I have to be very, very intentional about recognizing when I'm reaching that point of just breakdown, burnout, exhaustion, getting well ahead of it and taking care of myself so that I can be here for the long term. And I think that's a piece that most entrepreneurs miss. They're so committed and focused, and I've got to push, and every minute matters. And it's like, hold on, breathe, take a breath, take a pause. Part of being an entrepreneur is because you want to create your own path and your own journey and have that autonomy to live your life the way you choose to. So why are you creating exhaustion when you don't have to, right? Before you just keep pushing and piling in more hours, pause and reflect and figure out, do I need to be doing something differently here? What needs to come off my plate? Have I set goals for myself that made sense at the time and don't make sense anymore? So really it's about that long game. And if you aren't taking care of yourself mentally and physically, then you're not going to have the energy you need to sustain this journey.
Becky, we're almost out of time, and there is one question that I'd like to ask you that I didn't get to ask you earlier, and you can combine your answer with anything else that you think you might want to add before we end the discussion today. And that is, my question is, what are some of the tips which you give for anyone to keep a journal, to write down that information that you say would be very helpful to them, positive and negative? Do you have any tips that you could give people?
I would say make it a daily habit. because otherwise you forget, right? You go 2, 3, 4 days, and frankly, there it is. I can't remember what I had for breakfast. So, just capturing it throughout the day. It doesn't have to be lengthy. Sometimes it's just a matter of a few seconds that I'm capturing. I finished this proposal, or here's where I feel stuck, or I made a big decision. So capturing throughout the day so that you've got those reflections to look back on, and being honest with yourself. No one ever has to see it. No one's ever seen what I write down. I do it for me, not for anyone else. But just being honest. Where are you afraid? Where are you stuck? Give yourself an opportunity to get it out of your head. You'll be amazed at how much you'll notice growth over a period of time just by capturing what's really in your head. And then you'll be able to see, I was stuck on this, and then that happened, and then XYZ, and now I don't feel so stuck anymore. And those are the moments of just celebration, because as an entrepreneur, sometimes we don't have a lot of, right? We have to stop and create those moments of celebration for ourselves. But I would say make it a regular habit. It doesn't have to be challenging. It doesn't have to be any specific format. It's just kind of a brain dump, and evolve over time, right? See what works for you. What style, what format, what, organizational structure, see what works for you. But it's really just about capturing those lessons and successes as you go throughout the day and reflecting back, even if it's just for a couple of minutes, so you can see the journey that you've been on.
And again, it doesn't have to be electronically. Just find yourself a notepad and right away.
Whatever works, whatever you're willing to do consistently is what works.
Becky, give us your contact information so anyone who would like to contact you can do so.
So all forms of contact you can find on the website, simplechange.com, or you can reach out at Becky@simplechange.com, and that's my email, and I'm happy to connect.
Well, thank you. I'd like to thank also our viewers and listeners today. It's been very insightful, just like that meeting we had about a month and a half ago, I guess now. And one last thing that I would like to say to everyone, and that is, whatever you might be going through, just keep in mind that there's always more good things coming. Take care, and we'll see you next time.